All right, good morning, everyone. Officially, welcome to Tuesday. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Is it Tuesday? Are you sure? Are you sure? It feels like a Wednesday. Are you sure? You wish it was a Friday? Computer says it's Tuesday. Okay. Right. Okay. Let's say hello to some people here. We'll say hello to Kayla, hello, and Shota, good morning, and then we'll get right back into where we were. So, we were watching a little video on two ancient Egyptians, Kar and Merit, right? Which is
Don't finish it.
what's that?
Don't finish it.
We didn't finish it, but we're going to finish it. But this is pretty incredible, right? Like we can actually talk about these two people and know their names and know things about them from thousands of years ago, right? We actually can dig into their lives a little bit and see what it was like, which again, I think is super interesting. Help me out here. Tell me what we know about these two people.
Her husband is like an architect.
Okay. Her husband is a kind of an architect kind of guy.
And they're kind of wealthy.
Seem to be, yeah, they seem to be doing, they do okay, as people say.
Both of them are kind of good looking.
Yeah, maybe. I think, often, the Egyptians are kind of, they're very, like their statues and paintings are very stylized. And so people kind of, I'm not sure if they were good looking people or not, but certainly the woman who's narrating seems to think they were. Maybe they were. Who knows, right? What else do we know about these two? Husband's kind of an architect kind of guy. Maybe they're hot. Maybe they're not. Who knows? What else do we know?
Like when they if I'm not mistaken, in the CT scan from the body, they know that they. I forgot the word.
Okay.
But you said that when they CT scan the brain.
Yeah.
And they use something, yeah.
Well, they were kind of just able to look inside because they're mummified, right?
Yeah.
So they're.
And just these consolidated bones.
Yeah, we can see their bones, so we kind of know that they're in there, right? We know their bodies are in there. What else can we tell from the bones, do you think?
Car is about 5'6", and Mary is 5'50".
Yeah, we can estimate their heights, right, in life. So we know Carr is about 5'6". His wife was a little shorter, maybe 5'2" or 5 feet or something like that. What else do we know about these people? What was her husband designing specifically? What was his actual, like, yeah.
Oh, is it for the kings or like what's the one they worship?
I don't know. I don't know what you're trying to say. So somebody help Felicia out here. What? Okay. So he's designing.
He's designing tombs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's designing Pharaoh's tombs. Yeah. So that seems to be a pretty important job. Would you agree? I think so. Yeah, very important job. He's probably reasonably well paid, right? And I don't know if they'll get into this in the documentary, but yeah, like pharaohs would be people in general would be buried with a lot of stuff in ancient Egypt, but pharaohs in particular. And some of it might have been their stuff from their lives, but they would actually have little villages like this who are just cranking out artwork and furniture and all kinds of things specifically to put in the tomb. So, the pharaoh's in his palace, making decrees and doing all the things that pharaohs do. And there's basically this little tiny city of people that are working on creating his tomb, right? Planning it, digging it, painting it, and engraving it, and then manufacturing all the stuff that's going to go in it, right? Food and furniture and clothing and jewelry and crowns and all kinds of things, right? So this is not so much stuff from his life, but it's stuff that's specifically made to go into the tomb, right? Because they have this belief that you can use this in the next life. You can take it with you, right? Sometimes people say you can't take it with you, but the Egyptians think you can take it with you. And so Kar is part of this little village of craftsmen and designers and architects and carpenters and stone workers and jewelry makers, all these people who are probably the best in the land working away, making things for the pharaoh's tomb, right? And so he's part of that. Again, I think they do okay, right? They probably make decent money. Although, how are they paid? I don't know if that's well, we'll get to that. Hang on. So, how do we know what we know about them? We know all these things, but how do we know? Yeah, so fortunately the tomb of Kar and Merit here was completely undisturbed, right? Which is very rare for ancient Egypt. Most of their tombs have been robbed in the past, either a little bit or a lot. And so I don't know what the circumstances were, but the fact that everything was still in there allows us to know a lot more, right? We know exactly what was put in there, and it can tell us things about their lives, right? Things like, even looking at Merit's little beauty box. What does that tell us about Egyptian culture? It's not a hard question. It's simpler than you think.
They care about their looks.
They care about their looks? Yeah. And what else? And they wore women wore makeup, right? There's all these little jars and things, probably with, skin cream and the black for the eyes and maybe something to put on their lips, right, to make them a little more red or something like that. Yeah, women have been wearing makeup for thousands of years, and we can see that in ancient Egypt. Victoria. Oh, sorry. No, it seems like men did as well, right? Men would line their eyes with, with kohl, right? With a darker pigment, right? Really makes the eyes pop, does it not?
And they use perfumes.
Sure, right? Perfumes and oils that smelled really nice, right? It might be a long time between baths in ancient Egypt, so perfumes and oils that smell good are helpful, right? To keep you smelling nice. But they paid attention to that stuff, right? So just like nowadays where we moisturize and women wear makeup and, we put cologne and perfume and things on us that smell nice. Yeah, the Egyptians did the exact same thing, right? And Merit had her little box with all of her stuff, right? All of her cosmetics and lotions and perfumes and all of that stuff. I think we've kind of covered that, what kind of village they live in. It's kind of a village meant for craftspeople. But they talk about, the narrator of this documentary talks about this great pit. What's this great pit?
It was like a community dump.
It was a community dump?
Yeah, initially it was a well, but then it turned into sort of a dump area.
Yeah. Yeah, they were the townspeople were digging, trying to access the water table, right? And they went down as far as they could and didn't find any, which is kind of a bummer. But then they started throwing their garbage in it, right? And again, for an archaeologist, even though it doesn't sound very sexy, garbage is awesome because you can tell a lot about people by their lives, right? I think I said this earlier in the course. If I went through your garbage, everything you threw out for a month, I would probably know a lot about you, right? I would know all kinds of things about you. And so it's the same thing with archaeology. If we can go through people's garbage, we can find out a lot about what we know about them. And what's kind of an important thing that comes out of this great pit? Say again? Yeah, there's all kinds of love poems that are written down on pottery, right, that come out of this. And which is really interesting because she says that all of the love poems from ancient Egypt, they all come from this one place, which is very interesting. I don't know what to make of that. I don't know if people were particularly kind of lovey-dovey in this village or what it is, but yeah, we've got this kind of window into romance, right? Which is interesting because in the ancient world, how would you think that marriages happened? Victoria went like this. Well, maybe this is not the right question, but it's interesting to hear that this almost sounds like a love marriage, right? These two maybe fell in love with each other and got married, right? Do you remember there was talk about, men when they were sort of dating a woman or when they wanted to sort of get together with or marry someone, that they had to bring the bundle. Do you remember did you understand what that was about? Yeah. Yeah. So men kind of have to go and show off, right? And say, look, this is all I have, right? I've got money and a house and a fancy car, not in ancient Egypt. But look, I can provide a comfortable house for this woman, right? And so we hear the writings of one guy who what happened to him? He brought the bundle to the woman's family, and what did they do? They kicked him out, right? Oof, that's gotta hurt, right? And then he went back again and tried again, and then what happened? Wait, what? Yeah, they kicked him out again. Ugh, right? Horrible. But yeah, we hear a little bit about marriage custom, right? Going to the bride's family and saying, look at all the stuff I have. I can provide for this person, right? I can provide for this woman. Let's see. I'm not sure if we're not there yet. Okay, let's jump back into this documentary. Let me just try and figure out where we were. Does anyone remember where we were? Say again? We were 16 minutes in? Really? Wow. Nice one. Okay. So, online people, I'm going to take Felicia's word for it here. And I'm going to say that we'll watch from about 16 minutes to 33:48. Okay? And so the questions and the link is in Microsoft Teams as it usually is. Start at 16 minutes, go to 33, and then we'll maybe we'll answer some questions or we'll take a break. We'll see how it is. But let's go back to Car and Merit and see what else we can learn about these two, okay? Yeah, so online people, we'll see you in just a little bit, okay? exciting. No, hang on. That's what I want to do. All right. So we hear a little bit about granaries here. What is the function of these granaries? What do they do?
To hold food and provide salary for people.
Yeah, they hold food, and more importantly, it's their salaries, right? That's how people are paid. There's no money, right? So you get paid in food, you get paid in water for the most part, right? And then you trade that food for maybe other things that you might want, right? So again, this is a very complex civilization, but it's one that doesn't really have currency or money, right? They trade in wheat or they barter from there, right? Very interesting. Oh yeah, what did they talk about the moldy bread? You saw them baking bread, yes?
Usually use it as a medicine as well because it contains plasticine,
Penicillin.
penicillin, and
Yeah, we from mold we make penicillin, right? Which is what kind of drug do we call it? What's the word I'm looking for? And yeah, it's antibacterial, right? So we've had penicillin, probably most of us in our lives, at least once. I remember having it for ear infections when I was a kid. You get the banana flavored stuff. It's really good. But originally made from mold, right? And we see here that the ancient Egyptians had kind of figured that out, right? They maybe didn't understand the science, but they knew that it worked, right? And so they were able to use it to, help keep cuts or burns from getting infected, right? Pretty smart. What's the significance here of the East and the West?
Every day the sun is rise from the east.
Mhm.
They believe the god Thor, and when the sun is going to sunset,
Yeah.
in the west they think that the god is dead, and it's the meaning of the dead for them.
Yeah. So there's this kind of idea of the sun being born in the morning and then dying again in the evening, right? Which is very interesting, and also very interesting because not only does the sun, is it born and it dies, but then the next morning it's born again, right? It comes back. Even though it died, it came back, right? And that's kind of an interesting parallel because, of course, that's why people were being mummified, right? It's because they were going to live again in the next world, right? So their kind of idea of the sun dying and coming and being born again happens in their afterlife, right? People die and then they are kind of reborn into paradise.
I think it's a true idea because whenever like we are sleeping, we are like we are in another like world, and at morning in heaven they're like like being alive, and starting in like
That's true too, right? When you sleep, it's kind of it's like a little death, right? You lie there in the dark, hopefully you can sleep, and you're kind of sort of dead, kind of in a way for most of the night, and then you rise again in the morning, right? These things are kind of reflected, or if you choose to see them that way, then yeah, they kind of reinforce that idea of yes, you die, but you rise later, right? You rise again. And so yeah, there's this. So how does that? How do they kind of map that feeling onto the landscape? These ancient Egyptians. How did they take that idea of kind of east and west and birth and death and kind of map that onto the environment?
The east was a pleasant environment, and the west was just mountains. They weren't live in the west.
Yeah. So often what you see is, yeah, people in ancient Egypt buried on the western bank of the river or in the west, right? Because that's the place associated with death, right? The east is the land of the living, the west is the land of the dead, right? And again, it makes sense because of the sun, and they kind of imagine the landscape to work that way as well, right? Very interesting. So, and what's the last thing here? What were they doing in the Valley of the Kings? What were the Egyptians doing in the Valley of the Kings? Yeah, it's where the kings of kind of later Egyptian dynasties are buried. Right? At first, they were burying them in pyramids or under pyramids, but as it turned out, that was a bad idea, because of course pharaohs get buried with lots of treasure and gold and things like that. And if you've got a big pyramid, well, you know exactly where to find all of that gold, right? And so a lot of those tombs were robbed even thousands of years ago. And so later pharaohs had to figure out a different approach. And so they found this valley and they started building tombs in there and then covering them over so that A, the valley was guarded, as you saw, but B, you couldn't really see where the tombs were. Right? They were covered over with rocks and gravel, and so even if you wandered into the valley, you'd have no idea where the tombs were. And so the ancient Egyptians tried to keep robbers out of the tombs that way. It didn't work, but they tried. Right? Unfortunately, when you bury that much wealth, people will do what they have to do to get their hands on it. But
I think there are many theories that the pyramids were constructed by the aliens, not by the human. It's humans. It's over of the humans' abilities, but not Jews. There are theories. I'm not sure that I'm correct, but
yes, some people do argue that I don't know if they argue. Yeah, they do argue. Some people do argue that the pyramids were constructed by aliens, or aliens gave humans the knowledge in order to build them. Yeah, what do you think of that idea?
and there are many footprints of the aliens there. I think they can find many photos of them that they have face like this.
Oh, you yeah, I haven't read one of those in a long time. I remember reading part of a book by a guy who's big into the alien thing. His name is Graham Hancock, and he strongly argues that there's some sort of alien involvement in ancient Egypt. It's a big stretch. It's a big stretch in terms of trying to suggest that aliens were involved, even though there's not really good evidence for that. I mean, if you're looking for something, you will find it, but yeah, there doesn't seem to be, and it's interesting because, is it that unbelievable that people could have done what the Egyptians did? Is it that unbelievable? I mean, we're sending people into space. Like we unless you believe conspiracy theories, but like we actually sent a man to the moon, right? A human being walked on the moon and then came back and told us what it was like, right? That's incredible, right? And so, is it so unbelievable that these people that lived thousands of years ago, worked very hard and built stone monuments, right, and carved things? I don't think so. I don't think it's a stretch. I don't think that humans need any alien help in order to do this.
Oh, but in that stage, it was really, I think, unbelievable, because pyramids have really professional wonders here.
Yeah, it's
Difficult, I think, and nowadays they can, but at that stage, I don't think so.
well, in that stage they could too. It's just a lot more work. and you do need to know what you're doing. But indeed, they did, right? They figured these things out, right? They worked hard, right? They, a lot of people in order to get them to work hard, right? When the god asks you to do something, you do it, right? And so, yeah, pharaohs could, draft 20,000 people to start working on their tomb or to start working on a pyramid, and you do it because he's the god, right? So you kind of have to. But yeah, I don't know. I don't think what you see here is unbelievable. It's incredible, right? Like it's, the technology and the work that you see in ancient Egypt is just wild, right? And absolutely amazing. But, with time and hard work and, understanding the math and the engineering, you can do this kind of stuff. It is not easy. And it doesn't, things don't get done in a week or a month. But you can do these kinds of things. And, keep in mind, ancient Egypt is thousands of years old, right? Amenhotep, who they just talked about, the pharaoh Amenhotep, when he was pharaoh, the pyramids were already 1,000 years old, right? And so, again, think of the amount of time that people had to build these things. You can't build them in a month or a year, but, ancient Egypt was around for a long time, right? Even in the days of Amenhotep, Egypt was already ancient by then, right? Never mind after him. And so there's a lot of time, there's a lot of hard work, there's a lot of brilliant engineering and mathematics as well, but it's doable.
How many years does it take
To build what?
the pyramid?
They estimate it's about 20 years to build a pyramid, give or take.
It's more than,
Huh?
I think it's even more than like 20 years.
Could be. It's tough to know, right? We don't know for sure, but they estimate about 20 years. I've heard estimates, I think, of like 100,000 people, which ancient Egypt probably had. But again, you can do these sorts of things, right? They're not easy, right? Name something we've built that took 20 years.
Like now the engineer, you say, we can't like make something like this place without like a modern machines. They can do it.
Well,
Not can't do it, but it's like so hard for them.
sure.
The place they build this pyramid is like an amazing place that they put these pyramids on it. What I mean?
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? Is that sometimes, we lose bits of skills and knowledge that we don't need when we have an easier way of doing it, right? For example, if I put in front of you a Commodore 64 computer, I don't think you'd know how to use it. I think you'd struggle with it. And, the Commodore is nowhere near as sophisticated as my laptop is, right? It's hilarious, actually, how simple a Commodore 64 is, but I don't know how to use one. And I suspect most of you don't either, because they're actually so old that they work differently. They work in a way that we're not used to. And so I think we would all struggle to go back and do something in a more simple way because we become so advanced that things are easy, right? And so now we look at something like the pyramids and we say, well, no, we couldn't build that without, our modern technology. And I think more the case is that we've just forgotten how, because we have the technology that allows us to do things easier, right? We can do things easier now. We don't have to expend very much effort. There's a way to do it that's much more difficult, but if you don't have the technology, then you do the difficult way. If you have the technology, you kind of forget the earlier way, because why do it, right? Why do it the hard way when you can do it the easy way? So I suspect that it's not quite so, there's probably things we haven't figured out about, their their sort of crafts technologies and things like that. But I think they knew how to do it. We just don't know how to do it because we don't have to. Right? And you know, the proof is there, right? If you have a giant pyramid in front of you, they did it. Right? They figured out how to do it somehow, and they worked hard enough to make it work. And they had a long time to do it, right? Again, name something that we've spent 20 years building. Nothing, right? This building was built in probably like less than a year. But I guarantee you it won't be standing in 3,000 years, right? There'll be nothing left of it in 3,000 years. So I think it's difficult to get your head around too, the fact that, you know, they spent so long doing it that it's just hard for us to imagine working on building something for 20 years, right? But they did it, right? They had lots of people, they had time, they had the expertise, and made it happen, right? And you know, that's kind of I think that's worth paying attention to. But I don't think it was easy. I think it was very difficult. But you can do it. You want to take a little break? Okay, let's take a little break. We'll come back. When we come back, we'll talk a little bit about religion, and we'll talk about the Egyptian pantheon a little bit. Yeah. Where are we here? There we go. Okay. So, I got to put on the screen. So we are back. Again, the video is just meant to give us a little bit of a glimpse into the life of ancient Egypt. And again, it's not, not everybody is kind of living like this. These people are living in a village that has been created to kind of work on the tombs. But, they are regular people, right? They're not pharaohs. They're just regular workmen and craftsmen and overseers and scribes and things like that, kind of living their lives, right? And we see little glimpses into the way that they would have lived, right? Their houses, although most of the walls have fallen down, but you could imagine the walls were originally probably much higher, and maybe they had kind of reed roofs on the top to shade them from the sun. But we see, where they were baking bread and storing cold drinks, and we see, that the fact they were wearing makeup and writing love poems to each other and drinking beer and things like that. And so this is kind of the interesting stuff, right? Because I think it humanizes these people, right? They're just regular people living and working and raising their families and falling in love and drinking a little too much beer and having a hangover when they go to work the next day. And it's kind of things that normal people do, right? And the ancient Egyptians were that, right? They were normal people, just kind of living their lives. Now, a couple of things were touched upon here in this video, not a whole lot, but I do want to talk about religion, because we said before, ancient Egypt is a very religious society, right? When your leader, when your head of state is a god, that means everything you do has a religious connotation, right? Paying your taxes has a religious element to it. And so, again, this was a very religious society, and it's worth paying attention to what religion is and what it's for, right? And again, I'll sort of qualify this by saying, if you are a religious person, please don't take offense to what I'm going to say here, because the way that anthropology looks at religion is that it is a thing created by humans, right? So I'm not trying to convince you, against your religion. We're just looking at it the way an anthropologist would look at religion. And what they would say is that religion is kind of created for a number of purposes. And so here's just one of the kind of religious images that you might see in ancient Egypt. This is from the Book of the Dead, which sounds like a spooky thing. It does sound kind of spooky. But it's not a strange thing, right? There are some movies that, try to say, the Book of the Dead is this secret thing that's full of spells. But really it wasn't secret. You could get a copy of it in ancient Egypt anywhere you went. You could buy one. And often you see it painted on the walls or carved on the walls of tombs, because people needed to know the Book of the Dead in order to make it through the underworld, right? So when you died, between kind of your death and between paradise, you had to go through the underworld. And sometimes there were monsters to defeat. Sometimes there were skill testing questions to answer, just like on a game show, I guess. I don't know. And probably not. And you kind of needed to know how to find your way through the darkness in order to enter paradise. And so what you see here is a scene that you often see in ancient Egypt, kind of books of the dead, and it's the weighing of the heart. And so the dead person comes to this place, and their heart is weighed against the feather of truth. Okay? And I think it's supposed to balance. I think that's what happens. If your heart balances with the feather of truth, then you're a good person and you can enter the afterlife, right? You can enter paradise. If it doesn't weigh properly, if your heart is not weighed well against the feather of truth, then your heart is fed to this sort of crocodile monster at the foot of the scales, right? And here you can see Anubis is here. We're actually missing a little piece of this. Anubis on the far left with the jackal head, he's actually holding the hand of the dead person. So he's kind of escorting the dead person through this process. Then you can see Anubis kind of weighing the heart to see if it's a good heart. And then here on the right, you can't really see him because my head's in the way. Here on the right, you can see Tot, who's got the head of an ibis, and he's going to write down the verdict, right? He's going to write down whether this person is going to enter the afterlife or not. So this is just kind of one aspect of what happens when you transition to the next world, but you often see this scene shown over and over again, the weighing of the heart. Okay? But again, what's religion? What's it for? Well, an anthropologist might say that religion is something, a set of beliefs and a set of rituals that a culture practices in part to maintain social order. Okay, so religion is very good at kind of getting people to cooperate and follow rules, right? Most religions have some sort of moral code, right, about what you should do and what you shouldn't do. Some religions have kind of some kind of conceptions of reward and punishment, right? If you follow the rules, then something good will happen, right? You'll be blessed by the gods, or you'll go to heaven, or you'll be reincarnated as something good. Or you might have punishments. If you don't follow the rules, you might go somewhere else, right? Somewhere nice and hot, like Hawaii. Not Hawaii. So sometimes we have a set of beliefs. Sometimes we have a set of rewards and punishments. Sometimes religion helps people to explain things that they can't explain, that they don't understand. And it also engages people in some kind of collective experience, okay? Something that people do together. And I'll come back to that, I think, in a minute. 5 characteristics, okay, of religion. So, number 1, all religions have that there are, or believe that some sort of supernatural power exists, okay? So either it's a god or gods or spirits or the force or the Tao or, you know, Dharma or Brahma or whatever. All religions have some idea of a force that is greater than ourselves, right? And again, it can be one god, it can be many gods, it can be some sort of spirit or energy or whatever it is. All religions have some idea of this, and they have people that can communicate with this supernatural energy, right? Sometimes it's a priest, sometimes it's an imam or a rabbi or a shaman or a priest of some sort, or a guru, some kind of person who understands the supernatural power and can deal with it, right? And so, again, all religions have some sort of religious practitioner, whatever they might look like or be called. The second characteristic of religions is that they all have myths and storytelling that help to justify the religion, right? So the religion says that there's some sort of god or gods. This is what the gods are like. This is how the world came to be. And then there are other stories surrounding it that help to support those beliefs, right, and to justify it. So in Christianity, for instance, we have a god, right, who's up in the sky, I assume, somewhere. He sent his son Jesus to earth for a little while. Jesus was crucified, and then he rose again, and then he went back to heaven, sort of thing. But then there's lots of other stories that support that narrative as well, right? There's an Old Testament that's full of stories. There's a New Testament that describes the life of Jesus. So there's all these kind of stories that help support that kind of central belief. And all religions have this, right? They have myths and stories that help to support the religious beliefs themselves. The Epic of Gilgamesh, for instance, is one of those, right? Because the story is about Gilgamesh, right, and his adventures and exploits, but it supports the gods because the gods are characters in the story, right? Ishtar is in the story. She proposes marriage to Gilgamesh, and he famously says no, right? Gilgamesh's mother is a god, and her name is, I think it's Inanna. Is it Inanna?
The mother of Gilgamesh. Yeah.
Inanna's the mother of Gilgamesh? I think so too. Yeah, so his mother is a god, right? And so the story of Gilgamesh helps to support the belief system of the Sumerians and the Mesopotamians, right?
And
Ninsun, that's her name, sorry. Inanna's another one. Thank you, Ninsun. Third characteristic, let me try that again. The third characteristic of religion is that it reduces anxiety by providing explanations for things people don't understand, right? Sometimes it can be natural phenomenon, sometimes it can be the nature of the universe, sometimes it can be what happens when we die, right? That's kind of a scary thing, right? Is it all over? Is that it? Right? Do you just go and then nothing? Or is there something else? Do you go somewhere else? And if you do, where do you go? What's it like? Right? And how do you get there? And are there other places you could go? Like down there, right? Religions help to explain these things to us, right? They comfort us by helping us to kind of understand what the world is like, right? And
Are they true?
what's that?
The religion behaviors, are they true?
Well, that depends.
Then we go in another world.
That depends on whether you believe that or not.
What do you think?
What do I think?
Yeah.
I'm not a deeply religious person, so I really don't know what happens. And strangely enough, I don't really think about it that much.
I
But
think the best way is that not think about the future.
well, yeah, well, and maybe not, but some people do, right? And some people want to know what happens, or need some kind of comfort about that, right?
For
And
mine, whenever I think about it, like my mind is going to like demolished.
your mind is what?
I'm going to like it's like can say don't work in like future times.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's tough, right? Because again, nobody knows the answer, right? Lots of religions have their own explanation for what happens. Sometimes they're similar or different. Some people believe that nothing happens at all, but we don't really know, right? But again, it does help to reduce anxiety for some people. It does comfort people. And as I mentioned here, it also helps pass on morals and beliefs, right? Lots of religions have a moral code built into it, right? Here's what you should do, here's what you shouldn't do, right? This is how to be a good person, this is how not to be a good person, right? And that's important for societies as well. The third one is that, and I think Felicia might have mentioned this a while ago, I think, religion is a convenient way to transfer the burden of decision making from individuals to supernatural powers. So I think what Felicia was saying is that it legitimizes power, right? Why am I the king? Because the gods made me king, right? The gods gave me their blessing, or the gods gave me kingship, therefore I rule you all, right? So there's that. But there's also the idea that we can transfer decision making to the god, right? So if I come down as king and say, the gods spoke to me last night, and they say that we should go to war with the people in the next building, right? If that turns out to be a gigantic mistake and we lose the war, at least I can blame the god, right? I can, if it's my decision, then I'll be held responsible for it, right? When we lose the war against the people in the next building. But if the god told us to do it, well, it's not my fault, right? Clearly something else was wrong. Perhaps the gods intended something else for us. Perhaps the gods intended for us to lose so that we would learn, I don't know. You know what I'm saying here. transfers your responsibility as leader to that of the gods, right? And therefore, it doesn't have to be your fault. Right? And finally, again, religion is a mechanism of social control, right? So it establishes appropriate behaviors, and then usually there's some kind of punishment for not following the behaviors, right? Whether the gods punish you on earth, or whether you wind up going to hell or some sort of awful place after you die, or perhaps you are reincarnated as something else, but as a lesser form of life. Either way, there's kind of a reward and punishment thing that can happen, right? And so religions kind of do all of these things. And one more thing I'll just add in before we go further is that they often give people a collective experience, and it can be a very powerful one. Who here has been to a really good musical concert? Like EDM or rock or pop music or whatever. Been to? Who'd you see? You've seen a lot? Best one? What's that? The Future? Oh, okay. So at that concert, or at any concert really, often you can get a really good collective experience, right? There's a lot of people there, right? They're all kind of excited for this particular event, and they're all kind of feeling the same way about it, right? They're all kind of into the music, and you kind of get, everybody's cheering and clapping and sometimes stomping on the floor, and it can be a very almost religious experience, right? You have there's a certain energy to everybody being in the same place, feeling the same thing and the same emotions at the same time, right? It can feel like something greater is happening, right? Not just a bunch of people standing around, but like there's an energy, right? Something's going on. And religion can be very good for that as well, right? It gives people this ability to come together and have these sorts of experiences, right? Where everybody feels that, wow, something amazing is happening here, right? We're part of something greater than just regular life, right? And again, religions are really good at that as well. Rock concerts and so on are good at it, but also religion. Okay, so the Egyptians here, just like the Mesopotamians, are polytheistic. Okay, so they have multiple gods. We've already talked about that, and lots of the Egyptian gods are anthropomorphic. Okay, it's a fancy word. If you want to sound smart, use anthropomorphic. Anthro is Latin or Greek, I forget. Anthro is man, and morph is shape, right? So these gods are kind of in the shape of humans, but they have animal heads, right? And so you've probably seen lots of Egyptian gods, some of them with jackal heads like Anubis, some of them with the head of a bird like Tot. There's Hathor, who's often shown as a cow. There's gods that look like lions and hippos and all kinds of different things, right? Yeah, they're anthropomorphic. They're in the shape of humans. When you anthropomorphize something, you kind of make it human in some way, right? Yeah. So.
Show the behavior.
For
example, if you use a lion head for a human, what does it mean?
Well, sometimes the animal they choose for certain gods has to do with what the animal is like and what they want the god to be. So if we go back to, where's our friend Anubis here? There we go. If we go back to our friend Anubis here has the head of a jackal, okay? And jackals are kind of wild dogs in Africa, and they could often be found around cemeteries, because if you didn't bury your dead people deep enough, the jackals would dig them up and eat them. So jackals could often be found around cemeteries, kind of scavenging for dead people. It's kind of gross, but you'd find them there. And they also have a very kind of spooky, sad, howly sound that they make, right? So it's kind of like a wolf or a coyote sort of thing, but they make this, it's a little spooky. And so because jackals' association with the cemetery, the Egyptians kind of thought of Anubis as being shaped this way, right? So the animals in their environment are kind of used to kind of convey what they want the god to convey. Although that said, I don't know why Tote here. I don't know why he's an ibis. I guess maybe like writing is a very, delicate skill, and these birds they've got long beaks and long legs, and so maybe they appear delicate. I'm not really sure why they would have chosen to do that, but sometimes that happens. So the Egyptians are polytheistic, and I want to introduce you to some of the gods in the pantheon here. And so, let me just see where my slides are here so I know what's happening. Right. So I want to introduce you to 4 of the gods because we're going to watch a short video that will talk us through one of the stories, an important story. So with the Sumerians, we had Gilgamesh being an important story to them. Here we'll hear a story that was important to the Egyptians, okay? But we'll need to know a couple of the characters first. So the first one here to know is Osiris, okay? So Osiris is kind of seen as the god of the underworld, okay? He's not really bad or scary in any way. In fact, when you entered paradise, Osiris would kind of welcome you in. We often see him shown as a king, as a pharaoh. So you'll see he's kind of wearing the crown of Upper Egypt, like we saw earlier. And he's got 2 things in his hand, right? He's got a little hook, and he's got a little whip kind of thing. And those are symbols of kingship in Egypt. So you'll often see the pharaoh will have those 2 things, right? They're symbols of him being a king. So Osiris here is a god of the underworld, and he's part of a little family of gods, okay? So we have Osiris here. We also have Isis, not that Isis, not the Islamic State, but Isis. And so Isis here is the sister of Osiris, but also the wife of Osiris. Okay, so there's a little bit of incest going on here. What's that? Brother and sister and husband and wife. That's just how.
Is it true? Are they human?
Well, they're gods, right? So they're just fictional characters, but they're related to each other, but also married to each other. That's just how these stories go. So again, she's the wife of Osiris. She's kind of like she's a bit of a mother figure. She kind of has a bit of a like Virgin Mary thing about her. Okay, so she's kind of a protector goddess, and she's very popular. And in fact, people outside of ancient Egypt will worship Isis for a long time after. So she'll have people that believe in her. Even in ancient Rome, there'll be cults that are dedicated to Isis. And so she'll be worshipped in ancient Egypt, but she'll also be worshipped long afterwards as kind of a protector and a mother and sort of a female goddess, if you will.
They believe that God can only bear from the god and goddess, right?
That's usually this. Yeah, usually gods give birth to other gods. Usually.
Only one god, or there should be a god and goddess, and they got married.
Yeah, I think usually you the children will be gods too in that case. if one of the parents is not a god, you get a demigod or a half god.
It's why that they got married to each other. You know?
I think in the story they get married to each other because no one else is created yet. So often you'll see in these very early creation stories when the gods are born, there's really nobody else around. So they have to marry each other because there's no other beings in existence. There's no other humans, there's no other gods, it's just them. Horus is another important one. Horus is actually the son of Osiris and Isis. So we'll hear about him in the story. He's very important. He's kind of a hero figure. He's very heroic. He's often associated with the pharaoh. Pharaoh is sometimes thought of as like Horus on earth, if you will. So he's kind of the young hero of the story. Okay, he's very noble. He's very brave. He's got the head of a falcon, as you can see here. He's the hero of our story, if you will, the son of Osiris and Isis. And then we have Set here. And Set is kind of a strange looking creature. He's kind of got like an aardvark or an anteater nose. I don't know what it's supposed to be. He's also got these weird square ears that I don't know. He's a very strange character. He's the brother of Osiris, okay, the brother of Isis. And he's also the brother of Nephthys, who he marries and becomes his wife. So Isis and Osiris have kind of a little freaky incest thing going. And so does Set and Nephthys. They're brother and sister, but also married to each other. And as you can see here, Set is kind of his meaning kind of changes over time. He starts off as kind of just a god of the desert and of the wind. Eventually, he sort of changes a little more to like a god of chaos. In some cases, he's thought of as kind of an evil god. You know, they kind of take Osiris and Horus as the good guys and Set as the bad guy. But it kind of depends on when and where you're looking in ancient Egypt. The kind of god that he is sort of changes. So he's sometimes chaos, sometimes the desert, sometimes he's the villain of the story. Okay. So that brings us to this. So we'll look at this tomorrow because we've got like 3 minutes left. We'll look at this tomorrow, and Mike Rugnetta here will talk us through the idea of pantheons. And that kind of comes to your question, is that pantheons are families of gods. Okay, and so the question is, where did the gods come from, right? How are gods born? And so pantheons are kind of families of gods and the stories around them that tell us where they come from and why they exist in the first place. So we'll hear a little bit about that, and then we'll hear about kind of a classic Egyptian mythical story that has to do with Osiris and Isis and Set and Nephthys and Horus. Okay, and so all these characters will be part of a very important story, and we'll hear that story tomorrow. But until then, I will say you can pack it up and have a nice afternoon, and we'll see you tomorrow for the exciting tale of incest and family and sex and murder and death and rebirth. This story's got it all. It's like a soap opera. Okay, that's all for today. Pack it up. I'll see you tomorrow, okay?